start talking on here. But the idea
so
that like so much of the player's handbook, and I've heard other designers talk about this, is
let
so
me just begin.
to
She
combat.
is
There's this idea of these
amazing.
three
I
pillars
love
that
her
you mentioned:
attitude so
socially,
much. This guy is a D&D
exploration and
creator,
combat.
dungeon master and stuff.
They're kind of
She has
dispersed
this
throughout. I mean, you have
amazing
so many
attitude.
really,
This
really
guy,
cool
he was
spells
so
that do no damage.
kind of
You
coming in low on
like
this
the
one. She
barbarian
kind of
being able
snuck a
to talk
question
to
in there, just
beasts
really
and small
well
creatures
latticed
and
it in
all
there
these
in terms of like the book
that
that he
I feel like
made
really
for the
set
D&D board.
apart from, like,
And
the video
well, we're gonna
games
get into some
because
real stuff about
there's so
the
much
real
more
globe
flexibility
and
in
stuff
it.
like
The
that,
idea that, like,
the real map.
No, you don't
Here in a
have
minute,
to,
because I'm
like,
trying my best to do this
you don't
for
have to
Masons
solve
and
this with
Army,
a set
Marines, and so on and so forth, and I need to bump this up away from the fictional metaphysics universe that this is in. But one of the beautiful things about the D&D board is it actually gives you a beautiful general relativity model on how to define what this is. You know, out here, your name and your social security, your social security number and your date of birth is basically what you have to work with off of here. And maybe you're lucky and you get a resume off of the fourth dimension, and then how you apply that in fifth dimensional chess. You'll go back, you can make a move and do something and really capitalize a checkmate from an old move on your resume that you can do. And we'll get back into that in a minute. Let's just put that off to the side. That problem in itself will be very, very important, but it's a little bit heavy comparatively to the contextual information that I want to provide to the setup inside here. But again, she brought this question about a dinosaur in there, man. He lit up, man. He just immediately started to engage inside of the situation. He's kind of looking around, doing stuff, not really engaging, and then just immediately she gets him right into it, opens right up the interrogation system. You know, I've been watching a lot of interrogations, and I've been applying it to the D&D board from a different angle. So a good way to describe that type of problem is Army board training procedures or principles. Okay, not the 11 that I was dealing with Stoker with the other night when I was doing the my video, but essentially, how do I want to explain this? There's educational, operation, and self-development, right? You know, those are the three main training, not institutional, operational, and self-development are the three kind of safety, quality, quantity of the triangle of training that you got to deal with inside of there. And one of the bigger problems with that notation is I applied it at the civilian level, and I said it's the stone mill, any kind of saw books and models that you have to work with off of their station layouts, cut coefficients. Those would be your institutional, educational models. The operational models or stations that you deal with inside of that set have their own model of repetitive logs that you have to keep cutting up, performance logs, maintenance standards, and then how you go through that in self-development, right? So as we're going through here, the D&D board actually becomes something really cool. At that map level, no matter where you do it on this planet, right? You know, because it's all educational at that standard. Anything can become an educational, institutional model. D&D is its own institution with its own variants on what chemistry is by the magic, or how you're going to congruently base this model onto it. The station would be that specific board, whether it be Dragonlance or whether it be this, that, or the other. Take your Iwo Jima, your Omaha Beach, take your Patton blow-up tank standards into consideration for your operations. And we're going to begin to battlefield that the best we can, equally like we're going to do that for self-development. Now, see how close they are? Remember how I was talking about is that resume in a fifth-dimensional Terminator Gambit? That this thing can get pretty heavy pretty quick about going back and utilizing some of that material. Firstly, out from here, how much do you really have to work with? I mean, even somebody who may be educationally sound with the information, what do you have to present off of the information that can correlate names, dates, times, and standards that Wikipedia, Google, references, and standards that come into this, because those would be your institutionals. They would also be the station representation along with your personal development that goes into this all X, Y, and Z, X equals Y, Y equals Z, A equals B kind of stuff, A delta B, to transition energy and information into this form. And that's something that's very, very complicated and heavy to understand in terms of what Manabrachosaurus is your favorite dinosaur. And of course that would be an old rusted excavator or something that's stuck down in some swamp that you dig up 100 years later that somebody buried can never get out, given how deep it might have been in some terrain. But of course, if you got the equipment, the proper artifacts that go into the industrials that you might need for this stuff, it can get pretty real. And we could talk about real cost lines and parallels to those models in different time topologies, right? So that's going to be a heavy lead in terms of what we're doing here, at least what I'm doing while paralleling with respect. You know, intellectual property for Dragonlance case, fair usage. You know, I want to make sure that I give credit to this kind of stuff. I love the model. It works great for an educational model, sociology system, training it. Yeah, I love it for kids, you know, but it's going to be a little bit more comprehensive. It's easier to play the game than try to redesign the game. But with that said, let's take that to the college level and let's take that to the military level for a moment. Let's utilize that material to then say, well, we're going to teach you how to play the game. We're going to give you some of the fundamentals, and then we're going to then redesign this so then you can take this structural engineering and then apply it to which process you want. And remember, one of the important key functions inside here is you. We're going to make sure that because we're going to fix that standard model and apply that to be a gravitational base for what this does, while allowing for the fair usage and intellectual property system not to be violated. No, I mean no disrespect to D&D. I would certainly, the second I would kind of get to it again, I would then reapply this to a common core critical theory base to be the mainline model of how to break that down. But this is 12 years. This is 12 years plus up to 20 years, 30 years in the military career about how much you have to break down from a command perspective of the principles necessary to be able to go through this material. Okay, so with that said, let's go back to that original problem about what are some of the key features about the map making skills inside here that are from the DM or storyline to best say what character would have a better advantage or MOS inside of this degree base is going to be one of the better models to choose which type of institutional model, what type of functional book. I mean, it's all literature, it's all mathematics. To Kill a Mockingbird is going to be a situation of something that is very heavy. You know, it actually gets into the court system. It actually gets into stuff about Supreme Courts. You know, this is some heavy-duty material that a lot of people are just going to glance through. They're not going to really focus on it when the idea is to take a different Ingling's angle or perceive from that a system. Now you meet a dragon and you have to figure out what to do. What do you want to do? I want to ask the dragon a question. What's your name? And the DM completely forgets that small aspect inside here and locks up inside of the standards of what command lead is, or at least free thinking the adjusted model on what this may represent. There you are, Hemingway, trying to smash your face off the keyboard, trying to build enough detail or generalize the standard of the system to then say why. Now, there might be something in D&D where you ask a dragon its name, and commonly, given most of the stories inside here about, well, maybe they become your friend, or something under those ideas, or just some real hickey trick situation inside here, and that's not really what we're trying to idealize. Remember, from our side of it, we're trying to model the general form. You don't necessarily need to be special like those situations, because that's where you're going to do the free thinking. That's where you're going to start to Bernoulli's, if you will. Some of the variables are turbulent flow, Euler's numbers, that correlate to an Ingling's angle on how to properly dungeon master this, or how to properly mission command this standpoint inside here. I mean, is it the most important feature? No. But a question like that can certainly open a whole new range of spectrums inside of the situational model, instead of just going into the battlefield and using your crossbow or AR-15, M4, whatever you might have with. This is a very specific situation where she's talking about it in such a way where they were designing a situation or a tavern build. You know, we're still keeping the main models of what over prime averages most of the D&D world is going to gravitate to, and therefore it would make sense from your build on it while you're taking a different divergent flow. You might touch on one of the issues or one of the situations, but then we're going to traverse around that into a way that hasn't been presented before, or come at it from an angle that doesn't have light shedded on quite that in-depthly. Those things can correlate to time angles. When I say shed some light on the situation, we're actually looking at a time topology problem. When it casts the shadow, it's going to tell me not necessarily the time, but it's going to tell me, well, let's look at your character card and see how well you affect against this type of situation. Whatever that spooky monster might be, whether it be a dragon or a situation of planning, maze running, or a design of what is it? Not a cleric, I don't think it is what it is, but the conversational models. We want these situations to build in a more intellectual, conversational way that is both useful and interesting at the military standpoint or college standpoint, business models and other things, which are very congruent with each other, but have, if not correctly designed or limited to what their standpoints are going to be, can get radically out of control in a hurry and can start breaking down the universe. So the engagement of how you read something like Dragonlance, you don't engage in the situation. It doesn't take you there to then start to idealize you as one of the characters, with subtle differences, even though they may not be the correct model of the MOS or variable that goes into this situation. You could easily adjust into that situation. You could keep that feather in your cap or arrow in your quiver and be able to carry that with you and redesign that situation. You know, obviously we all don't have necessarily the melee sword like that, but we understand that a piece of metal or some kind of composition in that way can have an effect in such a way before the conceptual models of the wedge or speed or velocity or mass is going to make a difference at that kind of target range. And equally to target range, just want to say it into the situation. I'm being fairly rude by not integrating the information. I'm just letting one touch in and come in, but you know, you want to make sure that you reference those negligent discharges as a standpoint of a negative point. That's going to hurt you. It's got hit points against you or experience points where hopefully you should have known, or you made the wrong move, or well presented to the situation. Now in the simulation, you could see how you need to make the improvements on your character to be able to continue with less friction or resistance down these functions. So I think that's what I'm going to do with this. Honestly, I know that this was going to be my land nav situation, and the character cards are they're really undeniable about applying it in such a way that it's build strength, wisdom, charisma, dexterity. You know, these are real numbers that I could apply to myself. I could say, I could form a test in some way to pose dexterity, balance. There's IQ tests for intelligence and something like that we all can share. We can all be timed in an event that says that's what that is. And while we're going through that standard model, right, of the IQ test itself, it becomes something parallel to a character card. But where do you put it in on the situation for this build on this map, right? Do you slide it in here first? So now that I've gotten that written, I'm thinking to myself, okay, you know, all this situation about the artifact, but I only have a very limited space to apply that system to the artifact. Do I put it in the back of the book first, potentially? Or am I going to lock myself in some kind of corner for what this is while dealing with that problem I was integrating from the original system? Is that something that's gonna say, do I need to have a whole nother book with this just for artifacts, just for tools and inventory standards later on, while this becomes more progressive from mission command or command lead or a team lead, whatever variable that comes into there? I know they may not seem relative, but from a command at the top, the dragon level of what this is, I would need all of those artifacts. I would need all of those scrolls or systems inside here to properly advantage that. And when I say scrolls, I'm also talking about this from the school system of degrees. I need to make sure I get that A in that class for the intelligence of that standard, so then I can go through and know how to study it from a correct model. Or if not study it, to then train it from a standard and situation. But you're going to get into a big problem. You're going to have a lot of paperwork. You're going to have a lot of these systems before you get into the D&D models of what this represents inside here. Come on now. Of what your character card may look like inside of here. Now, this was just a generally random. I didn't go through it and manually do it again. But, you know, this gives me some insight. Now, you probably don't know what those rules are. Hell, I barely understand what those rules are as far as what the kids are inside here. But dragons, they come and kill you. And remember from the simulator of what this is, sorry about the language variable, I was trying to keep it a little tighter inside of here, that I would adjust and renormalize what some of those standards are. Now, we use the D20 as our capstone. That is the highest number of it. It's the astronaut, Navy SEAL, standard Army's Queen Derby run. Those would be the kind of test parameters that I don't necessarily need that. I don't need the Queen's Derby run. I got a backyard and I can set up some cones and some things. Equally, there might be in the same test, maybe potentially even, if not the same test, while just doing for strength indexes of all of those things. Sit-ups, push-ups, curls, and other things like that. If you look at the whole thing, not just the numbers, this person spiked the most numbers of most push-ups, most sit-ups, most pull-ups, and ran the farthest for what the standards are. That's great. And you would have a very high strength, and you would have a very high dexterity inside of what this is, and you would also probably have a very high constitution. But intelligence is a factor that's not necessarily directly correlated with those standards. But intelligence, wisdom, or constitution, excuse me, constitution would be high. And then you get these three over here where charisma is going to be a value inside of there as well. And as you start to go through these ideas, it gives us a system, a game, or a way to simulate these standards for kids, for college students that are graphing. Again, you're not really playing the game, but you're going to be playing this form of the game at that level, and how we parallel that to a military standpoint as well. And as we go through these, you're going to get a little bit confused at first if this is new to you about, you know, how, again, this standard is not necessarily what you think it is, because here nothing changes. You know, we can strip all this away, compress this a little bit, maybe slide this underneath here, and on one sheet of paper we can have that, and then inside here we can have actions. But as you develop in skills, you're going to get more actions. You're going to have a larger inventory. Features and traits, you know, these things are going to develop about you along with your description. You know, now that you're increasing in time, more missions, those things are going to add to your description, more MOSs and values inside here, along with notes and any kind of extras you want to be able to apply in here if necessary for those standards. But certainly organization, aliases, enemies, backstory, or other that you want to apply inside of this situation. They're going to correlate many different things, and it's your freedom to make sure that you put that out there. And it's also your freedom to make sure you defend that standard inside of here. If somebody feels, you know, you have to be careful about what you put out there for everybody. It doesn't necessarily make it great for every situation. So you want to be dynamic in the way that you can adjust this lattice and structuring polarization of these ideas to make sure that if you had a system like that that could potentially be a dangerous model in freedom of speech or freedom of press, that you're doing something to augment that situation to make sure that it's a well-balanced profile, that it's a really balanced model of how you present yourself and why you apply that way. Because then it doesn't matter if you're Dragonborn rogue or whatever inside of here that actually believes in a dragon god for what it does, old Marshmallow over here, Marshmallow and Salty, and the Balthamuth a village where they come from. Now, it's not all of them, not all Dragonborn come from there, but I want to make sure from your sleepy little town where you come from that you can generalize this information and make sure you apply it in a way where somebody from the Crusaders or whatever cross you may be nailed to inside of this situation that applies a value to you that then has to be adjusted, or where the role of the bone starts to change space into time into matter, where the value of that output is going to change the situation in the world around you quite dramatically. So you have to be ready and prepared for those kinds of things as we go through those models and apply any kind of standard model to you or for you, and then you have to make sure that somebody's willing to defend or represent that stuff for you as well. Now, this is a world thing, this big world table inside here, and how we apply these standards and models and things like this. And it shouldn't matter what language you come from, shouldn't matter male, female. Age is a determining derivative L over derivative T that is correspondable. But that's, again, one of these reasons you have to look for how much intelligence is inside of here, how much strength, how much dexterity, how much constitution, charisma, and wisdom might be inside of a situation like that. You know, that being that board may not have any treasure around it, but the speed run for that or how you traverse that situation may make all the difference to the treasures you might find laying around in there. So that's my note to you. I'll catch you on the next one.